I gave people all the stuff they really needed. Social Security checks, utility bills, TV guide.
I want a TV guidance counselor. TV guidance counselor. Staying up to watch all night, and everything's gonna be alright with my TV guidance counselor.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's TV Guidance Counselor. I am Ken Reed, your TV Guidance Counselor, and this is year 12 that we enter into. Today marks 11 years of the show, uninterrupted since Valentine's Day 2014, which is completely silly. Last year for the 10th anniversary, I went back and did a year in review for 2014. So I did a decade looking back because I started doing the year in review episodes, I think in 2019. So there was 14, 15, 16, 5 years we didn't have years in review. Last year marks 2014, so it was 4 years. And this will be 2015, which means there'll only be 3 years. So next year, if we all make it till next year, I will do 2016, unless you have something wildly different or I come up with something incredibly exciting to do that's different. If you didn't listen to last year's, that actually ended up being more than just the 2014 year in review. It was kind of it was kind of like a 20 years in review because I went through how I started doing comedy and all that stuff, because this year marks 25 years that I'll have been doing stand-up, and I'm recording this on Sunday. You will be hearing this on Monday, tomorrow, or later, if you download later, but it will be released tomorrow. And I was up in upstate New York last week, so it was nice to see a few of you came out to shows in Albany and Syracuse, so always nice to say hello to you. And I just want to thank all the new patrons. I know that things are pretty awful for the most part for pretty much everyone at this time. I won't get into this too much because I know that people don't come here for this, but, there are certainly much worthier places to spend your money than to me. So I very much appreciate that you are patrons of the show and new people come on after 11 years. That's fantastic. Thank you guys so much. If there is anything else that I can do to either entice you to become a patron, or if you're already a patron and there's stuff you'd like to see, let me know, and I am more than happy to do that for you. I have a day job, as people do or do not know. I've had the same day job for about 18 years. Man, is it stressful, partially because of the current political climate, but also there's, no bonuses this year, no raises, nothing like that. And I have 3 elderly dogs, 2 of which have heart murmurs, which means I have to go to a dog cardiologist at some point in the next couple months, which is a couple grand. So, things are tight, but because of you, I don't worry about it as much. So thank you guys so much. And in addition, I know I said this last year, but I think I'm pretty much done with most social media. I am still on Blue Sky. YouTube, I still have no issues with. So I will be on YouTube. If you don't subscribe to the YouTube channel, please do. Let me know if there's videos you would like to see on there. The podcast gets released on there every week. Again, I have video of every podcast. I don't know if people want to see those. I've experimented with clips and that kind of thing, but people didn't really care too much. But I could do that if you wanted that. So let me know. You can email me at kenreed, REIDTVGC@gmail.com, ken@kenreed.com, or tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. Those are all things that you could email me at. I am looking at 2015. So last year when I looked at 2014, my Google Calendar did not go back that far. And normally what I do with the year in reviews is I just go through my calendar because I have everything in there. And again, I always say not in a creepy way, like Supreme Court Justice beer. But it's nice to have. Also a little scary that people have that. So this year I looked and I was pleased to see that January 2015, there it was. So I have 2015 in the calendar and I can go through this week by week. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to go through the episodes. I have not looked at this in advance, so you're just going to kind of get whatever comes to mind as I go through here. And it will be the shows I released when I recorded them, in addition to like stand-up shows I did and all that kind of stuff. So please strap in. This is going to be just me and a microphone, and hopefully you're okay with that, because that's what you're getting. Also, I'm in a new chair in my office because I've broken a chair. I haven't put on that much weight. Anyway, at the Salvation Army, I had an amazing leather oxblood wingback chair, like a full-on John Houseman reading Scrooge chair. So if you hear some creaky, leathery sounds, that's what that is. I'm also just trying to figure out how to get comfortable in it. So anyway, let's start. So back at 2015, I said this last time, I was shocked when I looked at how much I did in 2014 with the show, because I thought a lot of this stuff happened way later. So like stuff I thought happened in 2015, even 2016 was the first year of the show. So the show kind of strangely sort of blew up in that first year. And just looking at this month in January, it's along those lines as well, because on the I'm going to count this 31st of December. Christian Finnegan was episode 51 of the show. And I recorded this at the Westin in the south end of Boston, South End, Four Corners, 4 Point Channel, part of Boston, where Laugh Boston is. He was doing Laugh Boston. So we had a lot of fun there. That's where we came up with the Twitter account Divorced Dad Horny, which I had for a number of years. As did he. We both wrote jokes on there. We didn't get a book deal or anything, which is kind of ridiculous. But that was my last episode of January of 2014. And first episode of January, really, it's 31st. But then the next week, I did a show on that Monday night at Weirdo Records, which was an amazing record store in Cambridge, which is no longer there. Rima Angela, she has been on the show before as well. Really fun show. I very much enjoyed doing that show. It was a storytelling show. I think I told some stories that were fairly dark that I never told again, that I believe one of the comics there said sounded like a super villain origin story, which they're not wrong. Then the 7th of January, it was my first episode with Jim Beaver, and Jim is the best dude. Jim is awesome. You probably know him as Bobby Singer from Supernatural, but he's a writer and an actor. He was on Deadwood and all kinds of other stuff. That episode, I went down to Rhode Island. In December, he had been doing Rhode Island Comic Con, and I met him at his hotel. And the hotel there, you can't get up to the floors unless you have a pass key. So instead of just like bugging Jim and having him come down and get me, for some reason I decided I was going to get up there on my own, and I snuck into a freight elevator. I didn't really sneak in. There's a lifelong I guess approach that I've done. Here's some advice to you. If you just walk in somewhere, look like you're supposed to be there, pretty much nobody says anything. And I had a bag. I looked official. I always try to dress up a little bit and look like I'm official, or inspecting something, and just look straight ahead, basically, like you know where you're going. Don't look confused. No one will question you. Right into the freight elevator up to Jim's room. We recorded that episode there. That was a ton of fun. I released 2 episodes that week because on Friday, this was a live episode that I had done the first time I did Gary Summers' New England Northeast Comic Con up in Wilmington, Mass. This is when it was like 5 minutes from my house, which was pretty sweet. And this was Paris Stemmen, who's Mike TV in Willy Wonka. This is the one people are like, oh man, was anyone difficult? And I just felt like I didn't click with Paris. I don't know why. I don't think he liked me. But there's some interesting stuff in there. But I'm reminded of a quote from Gene Wilder. And they asked him about working with the kids in Willy Wonka. And he said, all the kids are great. All the kids were great, except for Paris. Which is kind of hilarious and ridiculous. And that weekend I was also apparently at the East Providence Comedy Connection. So I was down at Rhode Island a bunch that month. I know that was the last time I did the East Providence Comedy Connection. I don't even remember who I was opening for. I was definitely opening for somebody of note there. They were not fans of mine. Not the person I opened for, but the club, and never asked me back. But yeah, there you go. The next week, my guest was Heather Elizabeth Parkhurst, and Heather, super nice. a really fun actress, had a great story. She really hadn't heard enough interviews with her. She was on a show called Sherman Oaks that was sort of like a like if you mix Married with Children with Arrested Development, I guess is what I would call it. And she also was on Married with Children. That never really came up. I think it was on Showtime. A lot of boobs in it. That's probably why. But yeah, it was sort of a fun show that was unique for the time. It was sort of a pseudo reality TV show in 1996 or something, and it's hard to see now, but was a funny show. That I recorded in the Airbnb I used to rent in the Hollywood Hills, up by Lake Hollywood, by Russ Meyer's old house. I love that place. The very nice lady who ran it sold it eventually and was no longer an Airbnb, but there was a little apartment in what used to be the wine cellar, and it was across the street from a house that was built by Howard Hughes for one of his ladies he used to stash all over the city. Really cool place. Not too far up in the hills. That's like super scary, but just far enough, kind of right off Barham Boulevard down by Warner Brothers. And it was where I used to like to cosplay that I was successful and then I lived in Los Angeles. No pool, but that's okay. So I recorded that with Heather earlier when I was out in LA, I think in September or October maybe. But oddly, speaking of LA, I flew to LA that same day to do the Riot LA Comedy Festival the next weekend, I believe. Yes, there it is. And so I flew in there and I stayed at that Airbnb. And the next day on the 15th of January, I recorded my episode with Molly Hagan, which will be out later in the year. And I did a show on Friday the 16th at a place called Little Joy. That was very fun. And on Saturday the 17th, I think this was the first live TV guidance counselor that was not done in Massachusetts. This was part of the Riot LA Comedy Festival, the second Riot LA Comedy Festival. The first one I had performed at. This one I was very nicely asked to do a live episode. I got a TV color bar test pattern suit from Spirit Halloween on clearance. I just gave it away last year because it no longer fits me because I'm old. By old, I mean fat. And I at first was like, well, I need to get a really good guest because nobody's going to want to come see just me. So at one point, I very nearly had George Wendt, Shelley Long, and Ted Danson. That would have been amazing. It kind of fell through, but it's how I got Ted Danson on the show later, I think a year later, or maybe it's this year. Like I said, I haven't looked through what I've done here, but that was a live show, and I ended up getting Billy West, who I had met at Northeast Comic Con earlier in December. And Billy was awesome. That was such a good show. It was at a place called The Smell, which I don't believe is there anymore. It was kind of like a punk rock DIY sort of Gilman Street sort of venue. Very fun episode. We sold out, which was crazy. Again, we're not even a year into the show now. It's not even our 1 year anniversary, and that kind of that amount of people are coming out. Super cool. The next night I did the Tomorrow Show, which was at the Steve Allen Theater with Walsh Brothers. That was very fun. I also recorded an episode with Christine McCarthy, which I'll get to when I put it out later there. I did Strip Stories, which is Julia Rossi at the Riot LA show, and the Mary Dolan show, Riot LA, and that was at the what is the name of that place? Oh man, it's a super cool venue. It's like a Mexican themed famous LA place. Oh, you know what? Let me click into it. I bet I could have it. The El Cid. I could have just looked. It was at the El Cid. That was a really fun show. I believe Dana Gould was also on that show with me. Then on the 19th, I did Tax. Zach Sherwin used to have a show at this French restaurant called Tax. That was very, very mid-century, very old school. It was kind of like the Hilltop Steakhouse, but served French food. I used to do it every time when I was in LA. I really loved doing that show. They would give you a food credit, so I would always get French onion soup and some kind of mocktail, usually like a virgin Moscow mule, which is good because mules really shouldn't be having sex, especially in Russia, where, there's not a lot of good social services. But anyway, ironically, also recorded that day with Paul Provenza and James Urbaniak, which I'll speak to when we do the show later, when we get to those episodes. And then on the 20th, I recorded an episode with Alan Havey. This is a very fun one that I ended up with sort of a major spoiler for the Mad Men finale, which I still haven't seen and don't watch. But it's funny. There's a couple times on the show where I've gotten like massive scoops that people weren't supposed to talk about, but I didn't know, and no one seemed to notice till later, which probably is a bad thing, meaning no one really listens to the show. But, or at least if you do, you keep your mouth shut. No snitches on this show, which is actually kind of cool. But they recorded with Alan Havey, and then I did Doug Loves Movies at the, where was I? Doug Loves Movies was at, I think at UCB on Franklin. I believe that show, yes, okay, it's coming back to me now. So that show was me and Ben, and who else was on there? I think it was TJ Miller and a couple other people. But anyway, in the green room on that show, I ran into Kumail Nanjiani, and he was like, "Oh, tomorrow we're in in Boston doing, they had just been signed to do the Meltdown show as part of the, oh no, this is wrong. I looked at this. I did the Meltdown show with them the next day. This was a different version of Doug Loves Movies. I have no idea who was on Doug Loves Movies with me that night. I'll have to look. It was at UCB though. So we recorded that January 20th, 2015. I think I was on Doug Loves Movies like 10, it was double digits. It was 10 or 11 times. I only won once. I think a bunch of people hated when I was on there. But some of you discovered the show from me being on there, which is, again, this isn't even the first year. We haven't even been doing the show for a full 12 months yet. And I think I was on Doug Loves Movies twice. So I got a ton of listeners from that. So that was one of the reasons that this kind of blew up a little bit. So the next night I recorded with Cynthia Rothrock, which I'll talk about when I get to her episode. And then I did the Meltdown with Kumail and Jonah. That episode I do recall. That was Bridget Everett was on the show. Dana, Eugene Merman. Like, it was just a crazy lineup that I kind of had no business being on. And I have the poster of it in my office right now. Because that was the cool thing about Meltdown. Well, there's a lot of cool things about Meltdown, but they would commission a silkscreen poster of the show every week, and all the people performed got a poster. So I think I have, 4 posters from Meltdown shows that were really fun. And I flew back to Boston. And the next week, oh, you know what? No, I didn't record with Cynthia Roth. Jesus Christ, guys, what is wrong with my brain? I got to tell you, this year has already been killing me. My God. I have no intention of stopping doing the show, and I haven't missed a week yet, but kind of for the first time in 12 years, I'm like, man, maybe I need some time off. Like, my brain is bad, and trying not to get too distracted. In 2015, I was reminded this was the last year I had before the awfulness that was the first Trump administration, which just kicked my ass. And then, time has been very strange since COVID. So I didn't know how good I had it then, but, so I'm trying for you. No, Cynthia Rothrock's episode came out. That was when I recorded previously earlier in the year. And she's awesome. Like, I can't believe it. Yeah, Cynthia Rothrock's the best. Flew back home to Boston. On the 25th, they did a show at a place called Outpost 186 that Ryan Douglas used to do shows at. It was basically somebody's house in Somerville in Davis Square. And the front room was like converted into like an art space. And that was a really fun show. And that week on the 28th, episode 55 came out with Ophira Eisenberg. Ophira was up to do some stuff for the Eugene Merman Comedy Festival. And I forget if she reached out to me or I reached out to her. But anyway, I recorded that episode with her at her hotel, and then we went and did the show together. She's awesome. Still lifelong friend. Did her show up here in Massachusetts last year. So I always love seeing Ophira, and that was a really fun episode. Then on the 30th is when the Billy West live episode came out. So that's the one I did at Riot LA the previous, 3 weeks before that. And that day I recorded with Paula Poundstone. She was performing at the Wilbur Theater. So I met her at her hotel, which I think was the W. And we chatted. Paula's so funny and just a legend of comedy generally, but also Boston comedy. that was really fun. I did the Mendoza line that night on Saturday the 31st, which was a show. Well, is a show. They're still doing that show at like a sports pub near BU in this really small, sweaty room. I used to do a lot more shows, guys. That's fine. I don't mind. Then on the 4th, I released an episode with Will Noonan, episode 56. Had a very unpleasant falling out with that gentleman in 2016, actually, due to the Trump administration. It's a long story, but he's a Boston comic. Anyway, he put out a special last year if you'd like to see his special, and I believe he's directing Kelly McFarland's special, which he's recording at the Cabot Theater in Beverly next month, March. And Kelly's great, so you should go see her or watch the special when it comes out. Yeah, so that was the 4th. The next week, episode 57, February 11th, I had my Christine Elise episode. This is Christine Elise McCarthy, better known as Emily Valentine of Beverly Hills 90210 fame, but is an old Boston hardcore punk kid who moved out to LA, started getting parts in shows, wrote an episode of Beverly Hills 90210. This was super fun. We recorded it at a bar in Franklin Village called Little Bird, I think it's called. And it's funny, doing the show almost exclusively remote now. Last year we did have an episode with Trip Underwood that was at my house. Also have a beard now. Right now, so if you hear rustling, I'm stroking my beard, which sounds more perverse than it is, and I kind of want to get rid of the beard. I don't know. Weigh in on the beard. Send me a message. Let me know what you think of the beard. I did notice the last time I had a beard was 2019, and looking at that, much more gray now. Much more gray now, which I kind of like because it makes me feel like an evil hypnotist. But anyway. Christine Elise recorded it at that restaurant, and my point was that I do kind of miss the atmosphere of some of the episodes that I did either at people's houses or at restaurants or Musso Frank or just like in a place. I recorded a bunch in like coffee shops, so there was sort of atmosphere, and at the time I used to be kind of annoyed by those episodes because I was like, oh, those sound qualities, it's a distract, but I kind of love it now. It's sort of more of at least personally, like sort of a snapshot of a time and place and something that I was doing. And the fact that, and I haven't done this because I don't really go back and listen to my episodes, but the fact that I could go back and listen to an episode, 2 hours of my life from 10, 11 years ago in this restaurant is kind of cool. It's weird, but it's kind of cool. And that's one of those episodes. Then on the 13th of February, we did our first anniversary special. This was a Valentine's Day special. The idea here was that Sean Sullivan, who was my inspiration for the show, and The Wind Beneath My Wings, very funny comedian Sean Sullivan, who had hip replacement surgery last year, and knee replacement. He's doing well. Sean's doing good. But he would come over, and we would do That Week in TV. So we did like February 16th, 2015, which would now be not even the newest week of television I've done on the show. I think I've done like a 2018 last year. I think I did. And I would pick, and he would be the TV guidance counselor. So we kind of flipped the stuff there, and that was interesting, a fun one. But that was that episode. I believe I did a Valentine's Day special also, which was a short episode, like a half hour, and I went through my spreadsheet of Valentine's episodes of TV shows. So I should dig that up again because Valentine's episodes are a thing. I never hear a lot about them. A lot of people, they're not as beloved as obviously Halloween episodes, Christmas episodes, or frankly even Thanksgiving episodes. But there are Valentine's episodes of a lot of shows. It is still within the traditional season, sometimes in sweeps weeks too. So you do get quite a lot of Valentine's episodes, the Pete and Pete one being the best, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. But there are quite a few. So maybe this week, I'll dig those up and I'll watch some Valentine's episodes. If that's the kind of thing you guys would want to do in the Patreon or like on Discord, do like a watch along or anything like that, let me know. I will set those up. Or I could do some YouTube videos about Valentine's episodes of classic television shows so we could see what that is like. Anyway, I did that week. The 18th was episode 59 with Brian Cook. Brian is a very funny comedian, originally from Maine. He used to do the competitive erotic fan fiction show, which I always did and enjoyed. Out in LA now, writes for Jimmy Kimmel, just a good dude. He was also on the Meltdown show I did earlier in the month. Love that guy. Very fun episode. An angry guy in all the best ways. And then, what is this? I did a private show. Oh, interesting. So that week, I'm discovering this as you guys are. On the 20th of February, I did a private show at Phillips Academy in Andover, Mass., which is like a very shishi private school, where like leaders of tomorrow went. I think like George W. Bush went there, and yeah, like all those kind of people, like a weird like Skull and Bones kind of thing. But I didn't do a lot of private shows, and so that was unusual. It was for the kids, like I don't know, it was like a alumni weekend or something. I remember I had to drive there in a snowstorm because we're in February. It's not that far from my house, but it took me quite a while. I don't recall being well loved by the audience at that show, but that that checks out. Then on the 21st, I did a Valentine's show of the Geek Week show that Kevin Harrington used to do at Kamikaze, which is a comic book store in Davis Square. That was a lot of fun. I remember handing out Valentines to the audience. I had like vintage Valentines, and I don't remember what else I did. I'm sure it was something strange. So I did that. The next night I saw Sleater Kinney at, where was that show? That was at, I don't even remember where that show was. Jesus Christ. Hopefully you're still listening. That my memories. Guys, it was 10 years ago. All right. I just have a calendar. I think I'm doing pretty damn good. All right. Then on this 25th of February, so the last week in February, we had Paul Provenza. And so Paul was someone I'd been trying to get on since like day one of the show. Obviously, awesome guy. Comics Only was a huge inspiration for the show. Big fan of Kids Court on Nickelodeon. Super busy guy, but in my last trip to LA, I was able to set up time. I went to his office, showed me around all his cool memorabilia and all that stuff, and it was such a cool chat. We talked about Facts of Life and how he was the warm-up comic there, and I hadn't listened to that episode, and our good friend, Paul Perino, who does Knickknacks on YouTube, who's been on the show, an awesome dude. If you don't subscribe to those, definitely look at him. But in his Kids Court episode, he excerpts a bunch of the interview I did with Paul Provenza because, speaking of the world getting awful after 2016, Alan Dershowitz was the consultant on Kids Court. And so before I knew him as a Jeffrey Epstein, I kept my shirt on, pervert, defending the worst of humanity. He was the technical advisor on Kids Court, and Paul and I talked about him quite a bit. So in that Paparina episode, he excerpted some of that interview. So I hadn't heard it since then, and I was like, my God. It's very, very strange. I'm sure there are moments like that in past episodes. I know there's an episode within Magazine from years ago where she talked about who's that weird Canadian doctor who cries and is about men's rights and is a weird incel guy, before that all came out. So there's definitely, I'm sure, some of that stuff floating around in past episodes, but great episode. I feel like I should go back and listen to that one because I remember really enjoying that one. And then the 26th was 26th of February. That weekend, I hosted at Laugh Boston for Dave Coulier all weekend. Super nice dude. What a good guy. I had done shows with Bob Saget, now with Dave Coulier. I never did shows with Uncle Jesse, so I didn't get the trifecta of all three dads from Full House, but I did get 2 out of 3, and got the hardest one because he's no longer with us. And Dave is currently going through cancer treatment, but he seems to be doing well, so I wish him well. As I said before, he's a super nice dude. What a good, like, just solid guy, as far as I know. I feel like I have to say that now about everybody, but I've never heard anything bad about him. And in my experience, I've never experienced anything bad with him. He's a good guy. I've stayed in touch with him. Very, very good dude. Then on the 28th, this was very fun. I saw David Cronenberg at the Coolidge Corner briefly. I had to run back over to Laugh Boston and host for Dave Coulier, but I was like, I gotta go see Cronenberg speak. And Cronenberg is one of my favorite humans. Like when people ask me who's like a white whale you would like to get on the show, Cronenberg's one of them. David Lynch was definitely one of them, although we sadly lost him. John Waters is one. I've talked to him about doing it, but he hasn't been able to. Same with Cronenberg. But I do know someone who is friendly with Cronenberg and was discussing with him how my Halloween episode a few years ago was about television movies where TV was the villain, like the Twonky and Terror Vision and that stuff. And he said David Cronenberg's response was, how interesting, which sounds exactly like what David Cronenberg's response would be. But anyway, I recall him being very good that night. Then on the 3rd of March, I interviewed for the first time Tom Rhodes. I had always been a fan of Tom Rhodes. I really liked Mr. Rhodes. I loved his story. He was doing Laugh Boston, so I met with him at his hotel, and he had been working on just starting a memoir at that time. So I think it worked out well for him where he was able to kind of contextualize a lot of the stuff that he was trying to write in this book. Really great chat. Became very friendly with Tom. Love that guy. Used to see him when I was in LA all the time. I haven't been out in a while, but he's doing well. Him and his now ex-wife, who they're still friends, but she was great. That was where I first met them. And on March 4th is my episode. I'm surprised it took this long, with the Walsh Brothers. So the Walsh Brothers, Chris has since they've sort of broken up, I guess, but they are two brothers, not twins, from Boston, who were sort of the inspiration for like so much of the comedy that I do. They had a show. They're from Charlestown. Had a show called The Great and Secret Show, which I talked about in my 2014 year interview last year, but it was a very weird late night live show. They let us do whatever weird stuff we wanted, encouraged us to do that kind of thing. I invited myself to the Aspen Comedy Festival with them in 2006, which was relatively life-changing. And I wouldn't be doing this without them. They moved to LA in 2009, I want to say. But on one of their trips home, I managed to grab them and they did the show together, and that was really fun. Dave has since moved back here. Chris is still out in LA, pops up in commercials every now and then, still does stand-up. Both very funny guys. So I would have thought I would have had them on earlier, but they were in LA. So I grabbed them around the holidays. I think they were home visiting their family, and they came over here and we did the show. On Thursday the 5th, I met with Maeve Higgins. This was my first time meeting Maeve. She was also here doing a Eugene show. I think she was doing Wesley Stace's Cabinet of Wonders. And so I met with her. We recorded in the green room of the Somerville Theater. Maeve is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. If you have not seen her movie, Extraordinary, it's like a horror comedy she starred in a few years ago in Ireland. She's not so much anymore, but she was on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me often. Very funny, has great podcasts, just super smart. She's the best. Really enjoyed that. Then on Friday the 6th of March, Friday the 6th, the week before Friday the 13th, I put out an episode with Matt Kona, who, again, is not doing stand-up anymore, but is another punk rock kid, went into stand-up, funny guy, Boston guy. Very fun episode. And on the 11th of March is episode 63 with Molly Hagan. And I love Molly so much. I think I still reference this episode to people. It's been almost 10 years ago. Became very friendly with Molly. Would meet up with her when she was shooting a movie in town or when we'd go out there. Haven't seen her in a while, but because she got a big role in the Walker, Texas Ranger remake. I think she's playing Walker's mom. So she did that for 5 or 6 seasons. I think it just ended last year. So she'd been in Texas for a while. But she's great. That's a really fun episode. Some really good stories in that episode that I still quote to this day. Then I also did a show that night at the Midway Cafe in Jamaica Plain, I think, which is no longer there. I don't know what happened. It's gone. That had been there forever. Friday the 13th, I did a show at Laugh Boston with Marilyn Rice Cub. again, super funny. She's great, from Mr. Show and 24. That was the first time I met her. Really enjoyed doing those shows with her. On the 14th, I did a thing called the Comedy and Punk Rock Storytelling at Bridge 9 Records. So if you listen to the show I did with Chris Wren a couple months ago, at the old location of Bridge 9 Records, that's where we did the show. And it was, I think Matt Kona hosted, and he and I were the only stand-ups, but like Mark Lynn from the Ducky Boys told a story. I think Jay from the Ducky Boys did stand-up on it. Wow, it's weird when I look back at 2015, because in a lot of ways it feels very, Larry's yelling, guys. Hold on a sec. He's fine. No one's come to murder me. In a lot of ways, it feels like yesterday, but in a lot of ways, obviously, it's 10 years ago. It feels like 10 years ago. Much, much longer ago than 10 years. Now Pete's gone too. I think it's fine. Yeah, Rachel's got him. She told him to shut up. So that was at Bridge 9 Records. And then I did You're the Expert. Chris Duffy used to do the show You're the Expert, Davis Square Theater. This was one of my favorite things I got to do all the time. I loved doing You're the Expert. Chris does a show now called How to Be a Better Human. It's wildly successful. He recently had a huge billboard for the show in Times Square. Chris is super smart, the most positive person I ever met. Between him and Sean Sullivan, that's the reason you have this show. That's the reason why 12 years later I'm still doing this show. Chris was so helpful and encouraging to me to do this podcast. Chris would always be the person who would convince me to go down to New York and do stuff and let me stay with him, and just awesome dude. And I love that guy. He's in LA now. He's doing that podcast, How to Be a Better Human, which he incidentally hasn't asked me to be on yet, but that's fine. I used to do his You're the Expert show a couple times a year. I think it was on that show, Double Digits too. I don't know if they're still available, but that was such a fun show. It was, you would have a scientist on and a panel of 3 comedians. We would not know what the scientists studied, and we'd kind of have to ask them questions until we figured out what it was, and then we would ask them questions about it. It was always a lot of fun, and Maeve used to do it. Really great show, and was always it kind of was exactly what I like doing. Like kind of just trying to be funny and interesting on the fly, learning stuff about all kinds of crazy things. Chris would usually have me on when the experts were something to do with animals, and feeling like I wasn't just some dummy from Boston who had no education. And then Chris did another show on the 16th. He did a show called Taste Test Comedy. This was at the old Improv Boston. And again, Chris is one of those guys that has a million ideas for shows, and he would just try them and do them. And this was a show where I think it was all like food-based sets that you would do, but they had like a food sponsor, and everyone in the crowd got to taste this food. And this one was sponsored by a local place called Bagelsaurus, which was a bagel place. I think it's still around, actually. Bagel place in Porter Square, and they made amazing bagels. And they were part of the show. It was just very fun. The 17th, March 17th, I had Bill Janovitz over the house of Buffalo Tom, and Bill was also on that Wesley Stace's Cabinet of Wonders show that Maeve was on a couple weeks earlier, and I had talked to Bill about coming over doing the show, which he did. This was awesome. Bill is the best. Really smart guy. If you don't love Buffalo Tom, there's something wrong with you. But also he wrote the theme to the current iteration of This Old House. He's also a writer, written some amazing books about music, about the Rolling Stones, about a bunch of other stuff. Sort of a music journalist, scholar, smart guy, just a solid, good dude. Then on the 18th of March, it was episode 64 with former Boston comic Laura Crawford. Laura had moved out to LA. I recorded this with her in her apartment in Los Angeles. And on Friday, the 20th, episode 65, is the episode with Maeve Higgins that I did 2 weeks previously. I recall that being a somewhat short episode, like under an hour, because we were kind of under the gun time-wise because we were doing the show. I'm surprised how many weeks I put out 2 episodes. Like March 2015, let's see, 3 out of 4 weeks I had 2 episodes. So that's pretty exciting. So that was Maeve Higgins, and then this is why. Okay, so on the 21st, excuse me. I did a show with Kurt Braunohler on the 20th that night in Somerville, Mass. The next night we did a show in Rhode Island at the East Providence Comedy Connection. This show, a patron in the audience broke Kurt's arm. So he, I don't know if you know Kurt Braunohler, super nice guy, very non-threatening, goofy, funny, sweet guy. His set is not remotely edgy. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, not like edgelordy. He had done a joke that had like something about rape in it. That was not the punchline. That was not the point of the joke. But after the show, Kurt was at his merch table hanging out, meeting people, and a guy came over and shook his hand and was like, "Oh, you think rape's funny?" And he just broke Kurt's arm in front of everybody and then just walked out, and the club was like, "Well, he spends a lot of money here." So nothing happened to the guy. It was horrific. Yeah, that was bad. That was bad. Oof, let's move on. The 25th of March is the episode I did with Paula Poundstone. I previously mentioned that we had recorded that earlier. So fun, so smart. I recall one of the fascinating things about Paula, about a number of fascinating things, is when she first started doing stand-up, you could buy like an unlimited bus pass. It was like Peter Pan or Greyhound. It was like a flat fee, and you could just take the bus as much as you wanted, anywhere you wanted, for like a full year. So that's what she did, and she did stand-up, and she would often end up kind of sleeping in the bus stations, and the bus stations would have those little TVs on chairs you put quarters in. And so she was, I think it was MASH. That was her like constant, like that was what made her feel comfortable kind of going through all those things. And I don't know, I just recall that being, very, very interesting to me. And that week on the 27th, episode 67, another week with 2 episodes. Jesus. That's Marilyn Race Club. I should have her on again. She comes through town fairly often, or like maybe once a year. But it's been 10 years. 10 years is long enough to have someone back on the show, right? Does that make sense? That's okay, right? Yeah, so I had Marilyn on. April 1st, I had Max Silvestri on. Max is an old friend. Max has since won a number of Emmys and run a bunch of shows and been in things. Sadly, this is horrible. Max's house burned down in the Pacific Palisades fires this year. But he's doing okay. He's got a kid. Him and his wife are doing okay. There's GoFundMe's for him. If people would like to give to that, let me know. I can give you links. But very funny guy. One of the guys I started with in comedy. He had been living in New York. He hadn't moved to LA yet. But I was staying at Chris Duffy's house, I think in October. And I walked from his house. I walked like 2 hours to Max's house, and we recorded that episode there. Then on April 2nd, this was an interesting thing. So in 2014, I had done this sort of bi-weekly talk show thing called the Members Lounge, and it was sort of a live talk show. There was a company called Red Star, which I don't think is still around, but they were kind of like a startup tech company that wanted to do some like web shows, and they had been interested in doing like a pilot for Members Lounge. So I did a pilot for them that was like a panel show. So I had 2 panels. It was like a UK style panel show that I had kind of rejiggered the Members Lounge show for, and there were sort of stupid games. And I remember I had a game called Why Do I Own This? And I would bring out items, and then each team would have to come up with an answer, and I picked which one was better, and it was arbitrary points and that kind of stuff. But that was very fun, and we recorded this. Nothing came of it. I think it might have live streamed. I don't remember. I wonder if I even have a copy of that. I know I have stills from it. Sean Sullivan was on it. Dan Bolger. It was very fun. It was weird. I forgot we did that. We did a pilot. Jesus, I did do a lot. Wow, I'm a loser now, guys. I don't do anything. But that was that day, Thursday the 2nd. Then I recorded with Sean Tumblety came over on that Saturday. And the 8th, okay, April 8th. This was Alan Havey. This was an episode I recorded in LA at Alan Havey's condo. He was having his kitchen redone. So there were workmen there. But Alan is someone who came up often, much like Paul Provenza, with comics only on the early days of Comedy Central. Alan had a show called Night After Night that was a really weird talk show. They had an audience of one. Alan was also on the new show, Lorne Michaels' post Saturday Night Live, pre Saturday Night Live show before we went back to Saturday Night Live. Long time comic, another Florida guy actually, like Tom Rhodes. This was a year I had a lot of people from Florida on the show, and Alan, really good guy. But he was a character on Mad Men, and I guess the scoop was the Mad Men finale wasn't until May or June, and I still haven't seen it. But the big thing is that Alan plays this character, comes back and like takes over the company or something, and like takes over for John Hamm's role, like takes his job. And Alan mentioned this when we recorded, so like 2-3 months before the finale, we got like a massive spoiler for the finale of Mad Men, and nobody noticed. So that was that. But then that weekend, on the 10th of April, I opened for Justin Willman at the Wilbur Theater, who's an amazing comedian, magician, and I love magic. That was really fun. The 11th, I went over to Laugh Boston in the afternoon and recorded with Greg Proops, which comes out in a few weeks, speaking at this time in 2015. And Greg is just the absolute best. I love Greg, good friend now. This was the first time we met, I think, and we had a really fun time. It was like an hours and hours long episode. Love Greg. And then I had to drive out to Western Mass to this huge Polynesian tiki restaurant that Justin Willman was performing at, and opened for him there as well. So that was really weird. I don't even think that place is still open anymore. What was the place called? It was called Hukilau in Chicopee, Mass. That was very weird. I've done some weird stuff, haven't I? Very, very strange. Yeah, so anyway, that that I did that day. And then on the Sunday, I recorded with Gitler, Raphael, who came over. Gitler had moved to New York, I believe. Recorded with Gitler. On the 16th of April, I was up in Portland, Maine with Todd Barry, who I was with last week in Albany and Syracuse. And on the 18th of April 16th, I said it was in Portland, Maine. On the 18th, we were at the Met down in Providence or Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And I put out a live episode with Eugene Merman from the Eugene Merman Comedy Festival that day. So I did. Oh, wait, no. I recorded. Okay, here we are. So I was in Portland, Maine with Todd on the 16th. Then on the 18th, I did a live TV guidance counselor at the Brattle with Eugene Merman and John Glazer. This was in the afternoon. And then that night, opened for Todd at the Met in Pawtucket. And then opened for Todd at the Ballroom in Outer Space in Hamden, Connecticut on the 19th. So that was a busy week. So that was Eugene Merman Comedy Festival in Boston, and 3 shows with Todd and a live TV guidance counselor. On Monday the 20th, I had a backlog because I've been putting out like 2 episodes a week, which is too many. And I had kind of a backlog of episodes that happened to all the Boston comedians. Angela Sawyer being one, who owned Weirdo Records. So I decided on April 20th, this the Boston Marathon Day, to do a thing called the Boston Marathon. And I put out 4 episodes of Boston comedians that day, which is weird of me to do, but I did do that, and that was kind of a fun thing. So that week I put out like 6 episodes that week, but on the 15th was Wes Hazard, who is a very funny Boston-based comedian, who has since moved, but you probably know Wes, who since being on the show became a Jeopardy champion. I'm not saying it's because he was on the show, but it's because he was on the show. And I love Wes, very funny kid, was very afraid of Pete, our dog. A couple of people have been afraid of Pete over the years, but he was very afraid of Pete, which I felt bad because Pete's a dummy. But he did the show regardless, and then he went on to win Jeopardy. April 22nd, Heather Elizabeth Parkhurst. That's the episode I recorded in LA. She did a very fun episode that was on the 22nd of April, episode number 78. And I did a live TV guidance counselor at Improv Boston, and this was with Mary Mack and at the time was Becca Brown. She has since changed her name. They have are very funny, Rivka Reyes, and very talented. But we did that episode live at the Women in Comedy Festival. Man, I'm doing a lot. That's nuts. Ridiculous. Then the 23rd, I saw They Might Be Giants. They were performing at the, I think it was House of Blues at the time. Then on the 24th, I hosted a storytelling showcase for the Women in Comedy Fest called A Wild Memory Nation. And I did another show on the Women in Comedy Fest at Club Passim called Two Snarf Minimum. I did 2 shows that night. Then I did Bangor Comic Con on the 25th in the morning. And then at 2 p.m., I recorded an episode with Aparna Nancherla, which came out later in the year, at her hotel because she was in town for the Boston Comedy Festival. Then I did an episode of Risk, live one at a church in Harvard Square for Kevin. I'd done a bunch of episodes of Risk. That's the other show that I did that was sort of a lot of people discovered me from. So it was like Douglas Movies, Risk, You're the Expert, and Dana Gould's show. I think that's where the majority of my listeners came from. But I think that was my 4th time on Risk with Kevin Allison. And then the next day, Kevin came over and recorded an episode of TV Guidance Counselor. So Kevin came over for that. Very strange. That week, also, The Replacements played on the 27th. Dinosaur Jr. played. Kathy Valentine was in town with the Waterboys at the Wilbur. On the 29th, my episode with Cliff Nesteroff came out, and this was an episode that I recorded in LA at Musso Frank. This was the first time I had Cliff on. I think he's been on twice since then. This is a very fun episode, a lot of atmosphere, like I was talking about before. Awesome dude, super smart. If you haven't read his books, you got to stop right now. Just pause this episode and go get Cliff's books. They are unbelievable reads. If you're a fan of comedy or history or just insightful, fun stories, basically if you like my show, you will like Cliff's books. We recorded that at Musso Frank, Hollywood's legendary Musso Frank. Yeah, that's a favorite episode of the year. Then that night, I also headlined the Shaskeen in Manchester, New Hampshire on Wednesday, April 29th. I haven't done that place in a long time. Wow, this was 10 years ago. And on Thursday, I did a show with Jeff Dye at Laugh Boston, and we recorded an episode of my show at Laugh. The Descendants played on May 1st. And I did another show, the live show with Mary Mack and Becca, aka Rivka, came out that day. So I had 2 episodes out that week too. Jesus Christ. And then the 2nd of May, I saw The Beat at Johnny D's, aka the English Beat. There was also a show called Super Freestyle Explosion at Canis Arena at BU, which was like Lisa and Cult Jam, Expose. Jesus, I used to go to things, guys. I used to go to live shows, and I used to go see bands play, and I used to not be uncomfortable and have panics in crowds. Things have changed. Have they changed for you that much? I mean, part of that's just getting old, right? So 2015, I'm 34, and I'm 44 now. So maybe that was, when you're 34, things are different. But yeah, I saw that there. Wow. The live episode came out with Mary Mack, and then Jeff Dye's Super Freestyle Explosion. And so May 2015, I did the Bridgetown Comedy Festival. And as part of the Bridgetown Comedy Festival, I got an Airbnb, which was a place called the Brick House Beautiful, which was this amazing mansion in Portland that was built to demonstrate all the different kinds of bricks that this brick company had, and had like these great English gardens. It was super nice. It wasn't expensive either. So I recorded a bunch of episodes while I was in Portland, which I'll discuss later here. But man, that was super fun. And it also, when we left, we had some time to kill before we went to the airport, and there was like this red folder that the owners had like all the info about the Airbnb and like local restaurants and stuff. And they called me panicked. They're like, "Where's the red folder? Where's the red folder?" So I'm like unpacking my bags in the street in the rental car, trying to did I accidentally pack this stupid red folder? It was there. They had it. They had the red folder the whole time. So the red folder is still touchy subject. But on the 6th, the day I flew to Portland, that was when the episode with Greg Proops came out. And that is one of my favorite all-time episodes of the show. It's like 2 hours long. Hung out with Greg that day when we recorded it. Again, I haven't listened to it since then. I should go back and listen to it. I have very fond memories of that. We recorded it in the green room at Laugh Boston. I think it was like the 5th episode in 2015 that I recorded at the green room at Laugh Boston, but that was super fun. On the 7th, I did a show called Let's Do It with Bree Pruitt. That was at a place called Router in Portland, which was like a weird goth bar, which was very fun. On the next night, I did a show called Secret Stash there on May 1st. Also recorded with Sandra Doherty. Also did a show with Maria Bamford. Then I did a show called Boogie Down at Boogie's Burger and Brews in Portland, Oregon on the 9th. And I did a live TV guidance counselor. It was my second live TV guidance counselor of the year in 2015. This was the second one as part of a comedy, or fourth one as part of a comedy festival. Yeah, what am I talking about? It's the fourth live one. So I did Riot LA in January with Billy West. I did the Women in Comedy Festival with Mary Mack and Rivka. I did Eugene Merman Comedy Festival with Eugene and John Glazer. And then this one is live at Bridgetown Comedy Festival with Brendan Small. And this was super fun. It was at the Doug Fir. Wow, this is year 2 of the show? Man, like I'm both proud of myself and horrified at how early I peaked. Does that make sense? My God. Damn, that's pretty damn good. Then I flew back to Boston. The 13th of May, I saw Agent Orange play a reunion show, which was pretty cool. My old band used to cover Bloodstains by them. And that's episode 81, the James Urbaniak episode came out. I recorded that in LA with James, who I'd met at the previous year's Riot LA festival. And then the 15th, I turned this episode around real quick. The Live with Brandon Small came out from the Bridgetown Comedy Festival, and we talked about Poltergeist a lot, I recall. Brendan's an awesome dude, started his career here in Boston. Amazing guy. The 16th, I attempted to get Hillary Duff on the show. She was playing live in Boston, and didn't happen. Yeah, I really, really did try for that. The 18th at 7, I did something called Chrome Dreams, and I have no idea what that is or where it was, but I guess it was a comedy show. The 20th, Sam J was on. This is episode 82. This is before Sam blew up. She since got her own show on HBO, became a writer on SNL, has several specials. Again, not saying it's because she was on the show, but, she was on the show. That's probably what it is. Then on the 24th of May, I saw Tenacious D and the Pixies, which is crazy. And I did another taste test comedy show for Chris Duffy. I don't remember what the food was this time. But that week, the last week in May, I released 2 episodes as well. I did an after school special with Sean Sullivan. So the show is normally primetime. So we did one like between 2 and 6 p.m. or something like that. That was a lot of fun. I should maybe do more of those, Saturday morning or after school or overnights or that kind of stuff. Because that was fun. So that was a fun one. And then the Tom Rhodes episode came out that week, episode number 83. Also drove down to New York for some reason. I was doing stuff down there. What was I doing in New York? Oh, so this year, I see. I was doing pilot podcasts for PBS. So I drove down to New York to interview DJ Hazard for this pilot that I was doing for PBS, our WGBH PBS station here in Boston. So we went down in like a fancy studio and recorded with DJ. This never came out. This pilot, it's pretty good. I have a copy, at least an iteration of it. And so they wanted me to do a show that was like an oral history of Boston comedy. And so I interviewed all these Boston comedy guys, and that was DJ Hazard was that day. Friday the 29th, I went and saw Night of the Comet at the Harvard Film Archive because it's an excellent movie. And then I opened for Tig Notaro on May 31st. June 1st, I interviewed Rick Jenkins from the Comedy Studio for this pilot for GBH at 4. And then at 6, I went over to WGBH and interviewed Tony V about that show. We also interviewed Mark Maron for that. A bunch of other people as well. Monday I had Jordan Hendren CV on, who would come out later. Episode 84, my first episode of May, of June was with Val Kappa. Val, this was the first podcast she ever did. She said she wasn't going to do any again. I think she did do another one again, but that's fine. Val's super funny. Known her a long time. Really, really enjoy Val. And on Friday the 5th, I went and interviewed Lisa Loeb. So we ended up doing like a half-hour show because she was super busy, and it was nice of her to do the show with me. It was a place called Bull Run, and I watched the show. It was very good. Lisa Loeb, very funny, and also just super talented. That was great. June, man, this year, guys, I'm impressed with myself. I don't know if you are, but man, June 2015. All right. So I should probably do a little trigger warning here. This is an odd thing to say, but I didn't quite realize how highs and lows 2015 was. There'll be some discussion of substance abuse, suicide, trauma, that sort of thing coming up in the next month that I go through here. So maybe fast forward about 20 minutes. Excuse me, and you'll miss it. But here we are in June, doing all of this stuff. I still can't believe I've done all these things in 2015. On the 10th of June, episode 85 is Zach Sherwin, a good friend of mine, MC Mr. Napkins at the time. He has a song called Ken Reed on his first album. Recorded that in LA. On the 17th is episode number 86 with Bill Janovitz of Buffalo Tom. Recorded that, as I mentioned earlier. I also did a gallery opening for Val Kappa that night in Lowell. She did a gallery showing of her art, and that was quite fun. On the 20th, I did 2 live TV guidance counselors. We did one, this was at Northeast Comic Con. This was also the week before my birthday. Did one with Jeff Klein, who's been on the show a couple times and is a great producer, writer, all around good dude. And with Julie McCullough at 12:30 that day, who is a stand-up, but probably best known for being on Growing Pains. I had her on last year on my Growing Pains cast reunion, so that was 10 years in between having her on their show. We did this at Shriners Auditorium as part of Northeast Comic Con. This is probably my favorite year at Northeast Comic Con, because the next night on the 21st, I did a stand-up show with Billy West performing music and Andrew WK performing on the show. What a weird time. Then I went down to New York. I filmed a pilot for Kevin Allison. They did a pilot for a film, like TV style pilot for The Risk Show. And I told my story about my dad and the dogs, which, reviewing that thing 15 years later, I'm like, oh, I would have done this differently. And my dad's still mad about that story. But I was down in New York, and I did that, and I did, I think it was called Wait a Minute with Eugene Merman, did a show for Audible for the same story. And I recorded with Karen Duffy, and Duff from MTV, as you may or may not know. And this was one of those episodes that was like life-changing, transcendent. Karen is just the best. Like, what an amazing human being. Absolutely love her. Still, this is one of the best days I've experienced as an adult. So just awesome. That's one of my favorite episodes, and I'm still friends with Karen, and I am incredibly grateful for it. She is just one of those people that the world is so much better off for her having been in it and being in it. And then on Friday, the 26th of June, 2 days before my 35th birthday, I released my episode. It was a double episode because I recorded with Beth Stelling at Bridgetown and with Lisa Loeb the month before this, and they were both sort of under an hour. They were like half hour, 45-minute episodes, so I sort of did like a double feature of those 2 episodes. So it's Lisa Loeb and Beth Stelling, not together, but separately together, if that makes sense. And the next day, on June 27th, the day before my 35th birthday, I got to do some panels for Massive Con, and this was the only year they did this, and it was in Worcester. And I did a Blade Runner screening with Joanna Cassidy, which was pretty amazing. I did a live commentary track for The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai with Lewis Smith. And I did a 30th anniversary screening of Goonies with Sean Astin. And that was one of the highlights of anything I've ever got to do. I think it's still on YouTube if you ever want to watch it. But that was awesome. Like I said, this year I got to do some of the best things I've ever got to do in my career. And that was fantastic. July 1st, episode 89, Micah Sherman, old friend, been on the show a couple times since then. Micah was living in New York. He was teaching at the Pit, I think, teaching improv. This was the show where we recorded it in New York, and I forgot my Zoom recorder in the green room of the place and thought it was lost forever, but I got it, but I panicked because there was like 10 episodes on there. But it was fine. Then I did a show on the 2nd called Wild Memory Nation at Improv Boston. I have no recollection of what that show was. I assume it was some kind of storytelling show. On the 3rd of July, I released the 2 live episodes. So the one with Jeff Klein and the one with Julie McCullough from Northeast Comic Con. The 8th of July, this was an episode I recorded with Heather McDonald. This was at Improv Boston. She was coming through town, so we recorded that in the green room, which was very fun. And a second episode on the 10th, this was with Chris Kirkwood of the Meat Puppets, who had a podcast at the time interviewing sort of old punk rock guys, and the Meat Puppets split at the Middle East. We recorded this in the Meat Puppets van. That was a lot of fun. Very strange that I got to talk to him. The 11th, I opened for Janine Garofalo, which I did a couple weeks ago as well. Again, always strange that I get to do these things. On the 15th of July, Andrew Mayer was on the show, Boston comedian, still around, just did a very successful run at Edinburgh. Good dude. I did a show called Castle of Comedy at Arts at the Armory, which, again, surprised that was 10 years ago, July 16th. July 18th, I was doing the Mendoza line again. Man, I was doing that thing like once a month. Jesus. On the 22nd of July is old friend Greg Weimer. He was my boss at WFNX, but he also was the very first winner of MTV's Remote Control. So he had some great stories about that. Really great guy. He actually gave me his prize Remote Control t-shirt, which I still have and I cherish to this day. Did a show called The Getaway on the 24th of July at the Middle East upstairs. I have no recollection of what that was. I think that was Will Smalley doing a show. I think it was him and Ginny Nightshade hosting like a burlesque comedy show, if I recall. Actually, that was pretty fun. I appeared on a Batman podcast on the 25th. I think it was about Batman 66. And on the 29th, Kevin Allison was on the show. That was the episode we recorded when he was in town the previous month. Here is the trigger warning stuff. That week, my mother died, which I've talked a little bit about on the show before. She had some issues and was staying with us as we tried to help her get on her feet. But she unfortunately died via suicide in my house, which is very rude. And I kind of just kept plugging along, which is weird. It was on the 29th of July. And the very next day, I recorded an episode with Veruca Salt. Just was in their van outside the Middle East and did that with her there. I did a show with the Steamy Bohemians on the Friday night. I saw the Damn Don't You Wish That We Were Dead documentary on the 31st. I think I just pushed through that sort of stuff. I don't tend to react to death in a way that's, I don't know, normal's not really a right word because there's no sort of normal reaction to those sorts of things, but it was complicated. I think I've talked about it a bit on the show before, but it was complicated. If you want to shoot me an email about it, feel free. tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com, ken@icanread.com. I don't want to bum everybody out, but it made things very weird. And because this year was such high highs, it was a really weird low. And I don't think I didn't miss a beat, which is probably unhealthy, but that's kind of where I was at, right? So kept going. I'm not just glossing over this, but it was kind of like, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it was, that's not a normal thing. And I realized most people haven't gone through that. It was fairly horrific. August 5th, Andrea Henry was on, old friend. I did Mortified on the 6th with my good friend Sarah Faith Altman. That was at the Coolidge Corner. That was very nice. She had recently lost a parent as well, which she wrote a great book about. So it was nice to see her and kind of commiserate on that sort of thing. I oddly, on the 8th, I headlined Nick's Comedy Stop, which is, I think, the only time that's ever happened. Very strange. The 12th was Jeanine Garofalo, episode 96. This is the one that we did back in June at the Bridgetown Comedy Festival. I also did a thing called the Pivot TV Showcase. I have no idea what this is. It was at Laugh Boston, and it was some kind of showcase for something called Pivot. I have no idea. I used to do a ton of like audition TV showcase shows, especially around that time, none of which came to any sort of fruition. But I'm not surprised. The 23rd of August, I actually did a backyard barbecue show for Dead Air Dennis. That was fun, very strange. And earlier, the month before, as part of the Women in Comedy Festival, Dennis, myself, and Chris Duffy taught a sort of podcasting 101 class. People asked us to do that. I always feel weird about teaching classes or charging money for that sort of thing, but people seem to enjoy it. They kind of asked for it, and it was more just sort of practical nuts and bolts stuff that I learned in the first year. Could kind of saves people some time with that stuff. The 25th of August did the Phoenix Landing, which I don't even think is there anymore. The 26th of August was Dan St. Germain. I recorded that episode with him at the Westin Hotel because he was doing Laugh Boston. Oh, I forgot the week before was Phoebe Angle, Boston comic, still around, very funny. That was a very fun episode for local comic Phoebe Angle, who's very fun. Then on the 28th of August, I did the Comedy Studio, and I believe this was a show for Erin Judge. I think this was like a release of her book, maybe. If I'm correct, this was the last time I did the Comedy Studio ever. And they're back in Harvard Square, and I have not done them, but I believe this was the last time. The 2nd of September, I did episode with Nate Johnson, episode 99, and opened for Jen Kirkman that night at the Sinclair. Jen is fantastic. I'm kind of blowing through the back half here because I feel like I bummed everybody out, but yeah, like I said, weird year. September, episode 100. This was insane that I even got this far. But I decided to do a clip show because we talked about clip shows quite a bit on the show. And why not? So this ended up being a ton of work, and people thought it was fine. If not, it wasn't beloved, but it was a fun sort of exercise. That week I also recorded with Lou Barlow, which is another highlight episode for me. I drove out to Western Mass where he lives and hung out, and he's one of my favorite songwriters of all time, and that was really fun. That comes out later in the month. Also performed at Great Scott, which closed, was torn down, and is also back. On the 11th of September, I opened for Kumail Nanjiani at the Wilbur Theater. That was a lot of fun. Man, I really did some cool stuff. And that day, I released episode 101 with Ben Weasel and Joe Queer, the Lookout Records pop punk guys. Recorded that show backstage with them at the Royale show, actually across the street from the Wilbur Theater. Yeah, Jesus Christ. Almost every week I put out 2 episodes in 2015. I still cannot believe it. That is nuts. Anyway, the next week, the 16th of September, episode 102, Jeff Dye, recorded that, as I mentioned previously, at Laugh Boston. The 23rd, episode 104, was Julie Kitayama, old friend, Boston comedian. That was a very fun episode as well. And Lou Barlow's episode came out the same week as the Jeff Dye episode. That's episode 103. I highly recommend listening to that one. That's another that I might go back and listen to, although it might be weird. Not painful, but just weird. Like it's a very out-of-body experience to hear yourself having conversations from 10 years ago, especially where your mind was at, and especially at this time for me. Then, Julie Kitayama, and on the 25th, episode 105 was Eric Green, who is a great producer, a director. He's still working. He did a great documentary on V66, which was a very unique UHF television channel that was sort of a rival to MTV, an over the airwaves, non-cable rival to MTV that we had specifically here in Boston, in Massachusetts rather. And the documentary is called Life on the V. It's streaming on the various streaming services now, and I highly recommend watching that. He's a local guy. Also did Mortified again that night. And on the 30th of September, it's episode 106 with Aparna Nancherla. We recorded this at her hotel when she was here for the Women in Comedy Festival. October 2nd is episode 107, yet another week with 2 episodes. Old friend Colleen Green was on the show. Colleen Green does the TV is My Friend song that you've heard quite a few times on this show. She was in town, and I grabbed her and bothered her, and we talked TV. Also did a You're the Expert again, Chris Duffy's show, and I think those aren't streaming anymore. I would like copies of those. Those were quite a bit of fun, those shows, and I would like to revisit those. On the 7th of October, episode 108, Caitlin Buckley, who's a very funny comedian. She's, since the pandemic, doubled her efforts in comedy and is out and about all the time in the city, and I highly recommend that you go out and see her. On the 14th is episode 109 with Matt Kirshen. We recorded this at the Bridgetown Comedy Festival in his hotel room. Very funny comedian. I also did a thing called The Dope Show, which I believe was Lamont Price's show. We did that. Then Lamont Price did my Halloween show. I think this was the first Halloween show with Lamont Price on the 16th. That's episode 110. That is a very fun episode. The 21st of October, 111, with Sandra Doherty, the sex nerd Sandra. She used to have a podcast on Nerdist. This was also an episode I recorded in the Brick House Beautiful in Portland, Oregon. And ended the month on Halloween week, not with my Halloween episode, which was out 2 weeks before that, but with Dave Hill, episode 112. Dave, super funny. We recorded this again at the Bridgetown Comedy Festival. I believe we're in a hotel lobby, not masturbating with a magazine. We are not Darling Nikki. But this was a fun one as well. It's very kind of low key for him. And again, one of those atmosphere episodes where I enjoyed that we were sort of sitting in a hotel lobby and you kind of can feel the vibe there. November, as we get into the end of the year. Teddy Pettingill and Krista Weiss, who were a couple at the time, both were stand-ups. I don't know if either still does comedy. I'm not sure, but they were very nice, very funny. That was a fun one. I always like doing couples. That's a weird statement. Did not mean that way. Doing people who are in like a relationship, having them as guests on the show is always kind of fun to see the dynamic and sort of where they where they overlap and where they don't. Then that weekend I opened for Todd Barry. And where did we do that show? That was I have no idea where that show was, but we recorded an episode of TV Guidance Counselor. Oh, we're down in Rhode Island. So we did 2 shows in Rhode Island that weekend. On Monday, November 9th, I did a Q&A with Cliff Nesteroff for his first book. We did it as part of the Harvard Bookstore's sort of launch of his book. And that was a ton of fun. I think that was technically at the Comedy Studio as well. That might actually be the last time I was at the Comedy Studio. On the 11th of November, episode 114, John Reinman, who was writing for Leno and a bunch of late night shows at that time. Then what else have I done? I did a fundraiser on Saturday the 14th, no clue what it was for. On November 16th, I was on Ken McIntyre's cable access TV show in Cambridge, Mass. I think that is still up on YouTube. I'll try to dig that up and put a link in the show description here if you can see whatever weird thing I was doing there. On the 18th is episode 115, Gary Summers, who was running Northeast Comic Con. Gary's also an expert on the Antiques Roadshow, sort of pop culture ephemera. I still see Gary often and do Northeast Comic Con, I can't believe, for over 10 years. On the 20th of November, I did a show at Super Mega Fest. It was a cosplay comedy show. And it was me, Nikki Luparelli, and Jimmy J.J. Walker. That was a weird one. That was quite a weird one, but I'm glad I did it. And the first of 2 shows I've done with Jimmy J.J. Walker at comic conventions, one, the other being in Reno, Nevada. On the 25th of November, the day before Thanksgiving, had Emily Heller on the show, who I think's won an Emmy now. And that was another She Was in Town for Laugh Boston. Very fun. On the 28th of November, I hosted a screening of The Princess Bride with Carrie Elwes, which was so much fun. We did a Q&A. He is back doing that now in Boston, I think, in March, maybe next month or later at the Wilbur. I'm pretty sure they've sold out like 2 shows. If you have the means, go see that, because he's very charming and funny and smart, and that's an excellent movie, and he's got great stories, and his book is great, and nice dude all around. On the 2nd of November, here's the end of the month, guys. Oh, this has been a harrowing year, huh? I do feel like this is, in a lot of ways, sounds stupid, but this was kind of like career peak for stand. I was 15 years into stand-up, a year into the podcast. This was like the most amount of cool stuff I got to do. I feel like, maybe I'm wrong. My sense of time is completely wrong now, post-COVID for sure. Post 2016, post COVID, but this has been a very interesting, weird exercise to go back and look at. I think if I actually listened to these episodes, it would be even more strange, but I don't know. Let me know what you think of 2015 in general, but for the show as well. Final month of 2015, Todd Barry, episode 117, and I'd known Todd we'd been doing shows at least a couple times a year together for like 6 or 7 years at this point. I did his show when we were in Vermont the previous year, and then he guested on my show, episode 117. Friday night, December 4th, did a show at Pavement Coffee House. I believe they paid me in coffee, which was pretty awesome. Ended the year on episode 118 with Jamie Loftus, who has gone on to be a massive star in the world of comedy and podcasting, and is super smart and funny. Co-hosts a podcast with Caitlin Durante. Very, very cool. This was very fun. This was before she moved. She was still local at this time. And I was happy to have her on the show, and I was lucky to have her. Episode 118.5, Andrew WK. That was when I recorded after the show at Northeast Comic Con. People ask me like what the 0.5s are. When I scheduled episodes, I'd schedule them way in advance. And sometimes if I couldn't or didn't feel like juggling episodes around, I would just put it in between as a 0.5. There's no rhyme or reason to the numbering, but it's why, I don't know what episode this particular episode that you're listening to is, episode 675 technically, but I think it's actually episode like 720 or something, because I did 0.5s and some I didn't number, and I don't know, it's a mess. It was 10 years ago, guys. Then this is massive. December 16th, episode 119, Dana Gould. So this is the first time I was on a podcast with Dana. Again, life-changing thing. Love the guy, one of my all-time heroes, a friend now, which is nuts. This was so fun. I still quote Charlie's Hammers from this episode. This is again one of those like quintessential, if I had to do like a top 10 all-time TV guidance counselor list, this would be on there. On the 17th, so this week I did 3 episodes like a lunatic. So episode 119.5 is Molly Crabapple, who's a fantastic writer and artist. We recorded that at a theater in Boston, the Paramount Theater, I think. When she was doing a signing. That was a lot of fun. Then the 20th is 2 interviews I did at Northeast Comic Con back the previous month with Claudia Wells, and one with John Wesley Shipp, who I think I've had on the show 2 other times, also at Northeast Comic Cons. The 23rd of December, Rick Canavan was on the show, another Boston comic, has an album out. I don't think he's actively doing stand-up anymore, but his album is very fun. Nice guy, very funny guy. Did competitive erotic fan fiction, Brian Cook's show on the 26th as well. And I ended the year with Rick Moody, the author, who is a fantastic author. You've probably seen The Ice Storm based on one of his works. He's written a lot about music and just a nice guy. I had previously performed with him in Rhode Island for one of John Wesley Harding's Cabinet of Wonder shows. We did a show at Brown University, and it was me and Wes and Rick Moody and Kristen Hirsch from Throwing Muses, which is a bizarre show I probably had no business being on, but was recommended by Eugene Merman, who's another one of my like patron saints, and one of the reasons that I am here talking to you now. And we recorded this in Harvard Square after he had done a book event at the Abon Pan, which is now no longer there. And again, is a perfect example of why I kind of do miss these on location episodes, because the atmosphere of these places is no longer there. Places that are no longer there are sort of captured on tape or digital file for this one. And this was a nice chat. That's 2015. I feel a bit shook looking at this year. I probably should have looked at this in advance, because there was a bunch of unexpected weird things that I forgot about that's made me a little bit too introspective. But you know, I'll be 45 this year. That's where we're at. I don't know. So I hope you're well. I hope you enjoyed this. Next year, presuming I'm here, I will do 2016 in review, and just looking at a little preview here. 2016 is a crazy year as well. There's a lot going on. So this peak may have been 2015, 2016. I don't know. You tell me. But next week, we're back to our regularly scheduled podcast. Christine Little is my guest. Very funny comedian, has a new album out. Yeah, I'll try to get out of my own head. Hopefully you guys are doing okay. If you have any hot tips on how to stay sane in this world, let me know. And again, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for listening for 11 years now. Thank you for being patrons. Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you for sitting here and listening to an hour and a half of me babble about 10 years ago, like someone at a bus stop. And I'll see you again next time on TV Guidance Counselor.
Looks like you got some kind of alternate universe in there or something.